Is this a great game or what? And welcome to our Father's Day edition of the show. We're going to be joined by Karl Ravech and his son, Sam Ravech, who both are broadcasters.
For ESPN.
Yeah,
right?
Big baseball broadcasters. And Karl also dips right into college basketball as well. And it's a special episode for us because, well, we're a father-son duo as well.
Right. And this is your first Father's Day as a father. McKinley Kurkjian was born on August the 10th of 2023. So what's it like for you to be a father the first time with Father's Day coming up?
It's probably the coolest feeling because I always knew I wanted to be a dad. And that's because I had my dad as an example as a great father. But, you know, people always tell you, oh, you don't know love until you hold your baby for the first time. And not that I would roll my eyes at that, but I always thought, oh, yeah, I kind of get... No, there's no comparison of the first time I got to hold our baby girl. And, I mean, I was also happy for other reasons because while my wife was in labor, Michael Lorenzen of the Phillies at the time was throwing a no-hitter and did so successfully. So there's two reasons to be happy.
Right. So we thought McKinley was going to be born on your birthday and on the same day that Michael Lorenzen threw a no-hitter.
Yeah, I turned 30 at the hospital, and then my wife went into labor at like 9 p.m. on the night of my 30th birthday, and then she labored for quite some time, and we had the baby the next morning. So she would have her own birthday August the 10th.
So McKinley has been to how many Major League games, and she's not even 8 months old?
Oh, my gosh. So she's 3 Major League games, including the game we went to and did a live show for the ALS game, which was really, really special. The first time we ever brought McKinley to a baseball game, it was really cool. And I know a lot of ballparks do this, but you have to go get a certificate, a first game certificate. Every team does it, and we still have it to this day, and it was really sweet.
You got to put it in a frame. It's a baseball ticket. Happy Father's Day, Jeff, for the first time.
And happy Father's Day to you, Dad.
Thank you.
We're going to get more into fathers, including fathers and sons of baseball, but I first have to ask you about the London series because as we are recording this on Monday afternoon to release on Tuesday, you have just flown in from London and drove from the Philadelphia airport to my home, 50 minutes north of the airport. We're recording. How jet-lagged are you right now?
I'm very tired, but I had such a great time in London. That's the takeaway from this week, Jeff, is what a great job everyone in London did. There wasn't one hiccup through the whole thing. Major League Baseball did a great job. The ballpark was in great shape. It was packed. The Brits are really starting to get it in baseball much more. You know, it's an acquired taste, Jeff. They don't play baseball over there. It's a soccer and a cricket country, but it was really, really good. And, you know, I told you I went last year. Cubs and Cardinals traveled like I couldn't believe. I couldn't take 5 steps in London without seeing a Cubs or a Cardinal fan. This year, the Mets traveled very well, and the Phillies traveled exceptionally well. Philly fans were everywhere. So we talked to Rob Thompson, the manager of the Phillies, and he heard from one of the coaches that there was a Phillies bar. In fact, there were 3 Phillies bars in London. And one was at, what's it called? Passaic Avenue was the name of one of the bars. So Rob said, well, if a couple coaches are going, we're all going to go. So the coaching staff and the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies go into this bar in London, and Rob said the place went absolutely bananas because they're all Philly fans in there, and then these guys roll in. So I said, Rob, what, did you stay maybe 15 minutes just to make an appearance? And he goes, no, we stayed 2 hours. We had a great time. That's how great that part was. But Bryce Harper was the star of the weekend.
Oh, my gosh.
Mostly in part because he had a home run in the game on Saturday. Now, he had planned, I asked him all about this. He had planned it in advance that if he hits a home run, he's going to go do a slide on his knees like soccer players do when they score a goal. So typical Bryce Harper goes, well, I got to hit a homer to do this, and then he hits one in the third deck. It was just ridiculous. As Dave Dombrowski, the GM, told me, he said, only Bryce could pull off something like that. So he hits the homer, and he starts running towards the dugout, and then he hits his knees and slides. Rob Thompson told us, like, he's looking at Bryce running right after him, at him going, what in the hell is he doing here? And then Rob didn't really recognize until after the game, in the post game, that this was a soccer slide.
Oh my gosh.
So when I asked Bryce about it, I said, did you practice this? And he goes, no, I've never really done that before. And he said, and yes, I was a little worried that I might get something caught underneath me.
Yeah.
But he said, I said, what the heck? And when I hit it out of the ballpark, I said, I'm going to do a slide into home plate. Into the dugout. It was absolutely tremendous. So you talked about the Sunday game, Jeff. So I called the Sunday game with Michael Kay and Doug Glanville on
Excellent
TV.
job, by the way.
It was so much fun, as always. So we get to a play at the end of the game. You know, Jeff, you know my mantra. I tell people, like, every day of my life, the greatest part about baseball is you can go to a game and you might see something that you've never seen before.
Right.
And I've seen, 4,000 games in person, and I saw something that I know I'd never seen before. So bases loaded, 1-run lead in the 9th inning. Nick Castellanos is up with 1 out. He hits a little tapper in front of the plate, breaks his bat into 1,000 pieces, and Luis Torrens, the catcher for the Mets, jumps out in front of the plate, grabs the ball, which is rolling just in front of the plate, runs back, tags the plate, and throws to first for a double play. That is a 2-2-3 double play. So I say immediately on the air, that's one of the craziest finishes to a game that I have ever seen. And I said, I'm guessing no game, especially a 1-run game, has ever ended quite like that with a 2-2-3 double play. So, of course, I called Frank at the Elias Sports Bureau. We grounded into double plays starting from 1940 on in both leagues. And that was the first time that a game had ever ended, 1-run game had ever ended on a play quite like that. It was absolutely crazy. I slapped my forehead about 5 times after the game, like, how can it end like that? But the bottom line is, it was a fabulous, fabulous time in London, and I hope we keep going back there. All right, other takeaways from the week. Of course, Aaron Judge had another preposterous week. He has 31 extra base hits in his last 30 games through Sunday. The only other Yankee that has ever done that is Joe DiMaggio in 1937. Wow. And for a 32-game stretch, Judge had the highest OPS of anyone in baseball since Barry Bonds in 2004, and of any Yankee since Babe Ruth in 1924. That's how hot Aaron Judge has been lately. He has been an absolute machine, and as we talked about last week, all of this happened after he got ejected for the first time. Just crazy.
It's funny how the way baseball works that way. You know, maybe that was what he needed to kind of turn things around, because it was not a good start to the season.
Right.
Who is your game changer of the week this week?
Now, Jeff, our game changer is, we're trying to present somebody who has persevered, who has made a change in his career and has done something remarkable when it didn't look like he was ever going to get there. So Matt Waldron is a pitcher for the Padres, and he throws a knuckleball. And in his last 6 starts, he's 3-1 with a 1.78 ERA. Jeff, when I grew up covering the game, and when I was a little kid, there were knuckleball pitchers, not everywhere, but it was not uncommon to see a knuckleball pitcher. Well, he's basically the only knuckleball pitcher in the game today, and he throws a knuckleball 37% of the time. It's not like Phil Niekro or Charlie Huff or Tim Wakefield, but he's still throwing a knuckleball. He started experimenting with it in 2021, and now he's really got it going really well. And Jeff, we don't throw knuckleballs anymore because we're so velocity conscious that we want everyone to just blow everyone away. So no one's teaching the knuckleball. So this guy has gone to an area where no one is even teaching. In fact, they're not encouraging anyone to learn to throw a knuckleball, which I think is a mistake. And he has really succeeded, because Jeff, when you throw a knuckleball, it is really, really hard to do. So years ago, the Orioles had a guy named Daniel Boone. That was his name. And he was a direct descendant of the Daniel Boone. And Daniel Boone weighed 140 pounds and was 5'8", and his second incarnation of baseball, he came back as a knuckleball pitcher. So I asked him about, throwing the knuckleball and being a direct descendant of Daniel Boone. And he said, the Daniel Boone was must have been a really courageous man, but he said, I don't think he would have the courage to throw a knuckleball on a 3-2 pitch with the bases loaded. That's how hard it is to throw a knuckleball. And by the way, I don't think I ever told you this. I faced a knuckleball pitcher, a major league knuckleball pitcher, Charlie Huff, in 1984. He was coming off the disabled list. He had a knee injury, and he wanted to throw a simulated game before he came back. So I'm at Arlington Stadium covering the simulated game to see if the best pitcher on the team, Charlie, is coming back. And Doug Rader, the mischievous manager of the Rangers, literally picks me up and says, "You're going to face Charlie Huff." And I said, "I'm not facing a major league pitcher." He said, "Yes, you are." So I took 4 at-bats against Charlie Huff throwing a knuckleball. And it was one of the great experiences of my life, because because all sorts of hitters have told me, you can't hit a knuckleball. I'd rather face 100 miles an hour than a knuckleball. First off, it can mess you up for the next game, and you can't follow it when it's thrown well. It's here, it's there, it's everywhere. So needless to say, I didn't put a ball in play. I didn't even make contact in 4 at-bats against a great knuckleball pitcher. But at least now I can say I faced Bob Feller in an exhibition game, and I faced Charlie Huff in a simulated game. 2 major league pitchers. Love that.
That's pretty impressive. Let the record show that this was mentioned on the podcast before. Bob Feller, how old was he when you faced him?
He was like 62 years old.
Okay. Right. Not discrediting you.
Right. No, you can discredit me. Believe me, yes. We have the Quirkjians for the week.
Let's do the Quirkjians.
Okay, so you know how much I love sacrifice flies. This is way over the top even for me. So on his 30th birthday, Harrison Bader of the Mets hit 2 sacrifice flies on his 30th birthday. So I called the Elias and said, has anyone ever hit 2 sacrifice flies on their birthday? Because, we have guys who hit homers on their birthday. We talked about Paul Skeen striking out 9 on his birthday. And we found out that Bobby Meacham in 1984 and Roy McMillan in 1961 are the only 2 players, other than Harrison Bader now, to hit 2 sacrifice flies on their birthday. So I told Harrison Bader this, and he stops me a minute. He goes, "Tell me I'm the only one that's ever done this." I said, "Sorry, Harrison. You're the 3rd guy that's ever done it," but I just love stuff like that. So Jarren Duran of the Red Sox hit his 10th triple of the season, and we're only 66 games in. So I checked for the last player to have 10 triples in so few games of a season, and that was Jose Reyes in 2011. Because as we know, Jeff, we don't hit triples anymore. We hit a lot of home runs, but not many people hit triples. So it really stands out that somebody's got 10 triples already. Ellie De La Cruz, who we talk about every week on this because he's so spectacularly talented, but he recorded his 4th 4-strikeout game this season.
Wow. So
keep in mind the major league record for 4 strikeout games in one season is 7 by Dick Allen in 1965. Ellie De La Cruz is over halfway there. My guess is that record is going to fall. And again, Jeff, different time, different era, but Tony Gwynn, Stan Musial, Joe DiMaggio had 3 strikeout games in their careers combined. 1 each. And Ellie De La Cruz, granted, those guys didn't see the pitching we're seeing today, already has 4 strikeout games. Plus, we had a game the other day. It was the White Sox against the Cubs, and Corey Julks led off the game with a home run on the first pitch, and Mike Tauchman ended the game with a walk-off homer. So the first pitch of the game was a homer, and the last pitch of the game was a homer. So I was surprised that we didn't have to go back very far. Jose Altuve in 2022 led off a game with a first pitch homer, and Aaron Judge ended it with a walk-off homer. So those are the Quirkjians for the week.
That's impressive. What about birthdays this week? I know we're celebrating Father's Day on the show, but do you have any birthdays for Is This a Great Game or what?
Yeah, Brock Holt. This is his 36th birthday today. Brock Holt is the only player ever to hit for the cycle in a postseason game. And I've told you many times, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Barry Bonds, Babe Ruth never hit for the cycle. Brock Holt is the only player to hit for the cycle in a postseason game. And in 1860, and this is for you, Jeff, a guy was born. His name was Pop Joy. That's his name.
No way.
And what is the name of our company that does the podcast?
Joy Pop Productions.
Right. So this was Pop Joy.
And for anybody who know, Joyce Kurkjian is my dad's mom, my grandmother, and Pop is what we called my grandfather, who's originally Jeff
So
Kurkjian.
on Father's Day, we have a shout out to Pop Joy. Major League player was born in 1860.
Pop Joy, 1860.
Amazing.
Who is he playing along with?
I'm not sure. He only had names like Pop Joy in the 1800s.
Nine-Toe Johnson was toeing the rubber.
Right. And we also had some pretty good things on this date in baseball history. And this date in 1938, Johnny Vandermeer threw the first of his 2 consecutive no-hitters. Of course, no one else has ever done that. Nolan Ryan on this date in 1990 threw his 6th no-hitter. Of course, he would finish with 7. No one else has more than 4. Nolan Ryan is the greatest power pitcher of all time, the hardest pitcher to hit in Major League history. And last thing is the Brewers on this date retired Paul Molitor's number 4. We talked about great number 4s last week. So Molitor becomes the manager of the Twins. And he's walking around the ballpark in Milwaukee when the Twins go to Milwaukee. And there's his number up there. And one of the young players on his team came up to him and said, "Is that you up there? Is that your number up there?" And Paul Molitor is the most humble guy in the world. Looks at him and he goes, "Yeah, that's me up there." So I just wish some of our young players would actually remember exactly who came before that.
It's in the cards. We're going to rip them. A pack of Topps cards here. And we start with, oh my gosh, what a great card. Raul Ibanez.
Oh, one of my favorite players. So Raul Ibanez, Jeff, has the most career homers of anyone whose last name starts with I. Of course, I know the all-time home run leader for every letter of the alphabet. I could do it for you right now, but that would be ridiculous and it would take too much time. Plus, Raul Ibanez is one of 3 players joining Hank Sauer and Davey Lopes. Try to picture this, Jeff. More homers in his 40s than he hit in his 20s.
That's crazy.
Think about that for a second.
All right, next up, not the country star, but the baseball player. It's Kenny Rogers.
Oh, love Kenny Rogers. So Kenny Rogers was a left-handed outfielder shortstop in high school, weighed 135 pounds. But because he had such a great arm, the Texas Rangers drafted him as a pitcher. But he had never pitched before, so he goes to spring training for the first time as a professional baseball player. And Sid Hudson, the pitching coach for the Rangers, says, "Okay, let's see you throw off the mound." And then he said, "All right, let's see you go from the stretch, not the windup." And Kenny Rogers looks at Sid Hudson and said, I don't know how to do that.
What is that?
He had never done that before. And the irony is, he turns out to win over 200 games in his major league career and had one of the best pickoff moves I've ever seen. And yet he didn't even know how to go from the stretch when he first became a professional baseball player.
One player who has been really stepping up this season, Edmundo Sosa, since Trey Turner went down.
Now Trey Turner's going to be back in the next week, which is great news for the Phillies. But Sosa has been absolutely tremendous for them. First 27 games that he played at shortstop, replacing Trey Turner, did not make an error and really swung the bat exceptionally well. And he's one of Rob Thompson's all-time favorite players. So Sosa in London overslept and is because of the time change and everything else. And he showed up late to the ballpark for the Friday workout. And he's never late. He's always the first guy there. So he comes running out to the outfield and to Rob Thompson, who's on the field, and he's literally crying. weeping. Like,
No
I'm
way.
so sorry. My cell phone died when I was asleep and I got caught up in the jet lag. He was crying. And Rob Thompson had to say, Edmundo, don't worry. You're good. So he played really well over the weekend.
All right, Miles Michaelis.
All right, Miles Michaelis is a good major league pitcher, but what struck me about him was last year at the London series, he went all over London, like experimenting, being an adventurer, and seeing everything he could possibly see. He said a very interesting thing to me. He said, this is what the trip to London is all about, is what you see beyond baseball. He said, I played 3 years in Japan, he told me. And he goes, I can probably remember 3 games that specific games, like shutout here. But he said, but I'll never forget, say, going to the concentration camps in Japan or Hiroshima. These are the things that we take away from these trips. It was such a profound look at things by a Major League Baseball player. Very encouraging.
How about a Doug Glanville card?
Doug Glanville, my friend.
You just hung out with him in London.
I hung out a lot with Doug in London. He is so much fun. And I said this at the beginning of the broadcast. He wrote a poem to kick off the broadcast. And I had to say on the air to Michael Kay, this just isn't fair that Doug Glanville played at the major leagues for a long time, and he's a better writer than me. That just isn't right, because he wrote a beautiful poem to kick off the Sunday game in London.
Well, not the Suarez I named my dog after, as in Ranger. This is... Oh, I'm going to screw it up.
Eugenio Suarez.
Thank you. I was going to call him Eugenio.
Right.
Eugenio Suarez.
Right. Very popular guy with the Mariners, was traded to the Diamondbacks in the offseason, strikes out a lot, has gotten much better defensively, and he hits the ball out of the ballpark. Not at the same rate this year as other years, but Jeff, this just shows you how your poor dad sometimes just goes way overboard. I thought Suarez was going to lead the league in homers one year, and he's got all the vowels in his name. So A, E, I, O, and U are in Eugenio Suarez. So I actually went through all the home run champions of all time to see if there's anyone else that has an A, E, I, O, and U. A guy named Jack Fournier in 1924 led the league in home runs and has all the vowels in his name. Of course, Eddie Figueroa, Nelson Figueroa, 2 guys who played in the major leagues, have all their vowels in their last name. A, E, I, O, and U in their last name.
All right, let's go league in lids here. We've put every single Major League Baseball team in this amazing lids hat that has every team in it. And every week we pull a different team name. And right now, you're looking at the St. Louis Cardinals.
All right, there's an argument. What's the greatest team in the greatest franchise in the history of the National League? It's either the Cardinals or the Dodgers. It might be the Cardinals. What has always struck me, Jeff, about going to St. Louis is what an amazing baseball town that is. I told you that I went to a bar there after a game once, and I said and the place was packed after the game. I said, what's the deal with this place? He goes, well, we're open 81 days a year. That's it. So they're only open after Cardinal home games. Not everyone goes to downtown St. Louis on a non-game night. They don't even open. But when the Cardinals are playing, they are absolutely packed at all times. I've met some people there, including a grandmother who lives in St. Louis, and she drives around. Her car is like a Volkswagen Bug, and it looks like a baseball. In other words, there are seams running on and since it's kind of circular, it looks just like a baseball driving through the streets. And Tony Gwynn, got hit number 3,000 in Montreal. And he whispered to me once, he said, I kind of wish I hadn't gotten 3,000 to Montreal because there wasn't anyone at the game. Our next game on the road was in St. Louis. And he said, I always kind of wish I'd gotten 3,000 in St. Louis because those people would have really appreciated it.
Oh, that's really special. Hey, we've got a Kurkjian quandary. This is where we ask you a question to respond either on our socials at Great Game or What or on our website, greatgameorwhat.com. With the NBA Finals happening right now, Celtics lead 2-0. Game 3 will be on Wednesday night against the Dallas Mavericks. Our favorite Kurkjian quandary would be the current Boston Celtics team against the Kurkjian family. Now, Dad, set the stage. How many point lead do we have? Now, granted, this is a hypothetical.
Right. We have a 30-point lead with 2 minutes to go. The Celtics have the ball inbounding under their own basket. The question is, can we hold a 30-point lead in 2 minutes against the Celtics?
And keep in mind, the lineup for the Kurkjians is Tim and Jeff Kurkjian, along with Mark, my sister's husband, who was a good high school player, really good high school player. Kelly, who arguably maybe was the best when it came to our family. Sorry, Dad. At least given,
Kelly Kurkjian made 54 out of 56 free throws her senior year.
You would say she was quite a legend in her high school days. And then are we putting my wife, Emily?
Yes, Emily's on the team. Okay.
So she was a cheerleader. Right. Not a basketball player, but it doesn't even matter either way.
Right. So I say that we lose. I say that the Celtics score every 7.5 seconds, score 34 points, and beat us by 4. Because obviously we're not going to score. Because the biggest problem, Jeff, is going to be getting the ball in bounds. How are we going to get it in bounds? I don't think we are. Or if Mark just throws it as high as he can, they're just going to intercept it, throw it to Jason Tatum. He's going to dunk it. And then the clock is going to stop in the last 2 minutes of an NBA game. Then we're going to have the same problem inbounding the ball. We're not going to score. They're going to score every 7 seconds. They're going to score 34 points and beat us by 4. You agree or not?
I don't. I think they're going to score more than that. I think they're going to score every 4. So with that being said, Kurkjian Quandary, if you think we could win this, let us know. But how many points do we have to be up by with only 2 minutes to go for us to actually pull off the win? Is it 30, 40, 50, 60?
No, we don't need 60. We would, if we had a 40-point lead, we would win the game.
We would still lose.
No, we wouldn't.
I think it needs to be.
It's mathematically impossible, I think.
Father's Day. This is our Father's Day edition, and I want to just thank Bill Biggie Field for submitting a question at greatgamerwhat.com. Now, Dad, you were the greatest dad when I was a kid growing up. You continue to be the best dad in the world. But he wrote a question that was very interesting, and a question I grew up getting all the time, which was, what was it like growing up with a dad in baseball media? And he even added, you guys seem like you have the best relationship. How did you get that when Dad was traveling all the time growing up? And
I traveled a lot, there's no doubt. But again, I didn't travel hardly at all during the off season, and I picked and chose when I would go on the road, other than October and spring training. So you guys came with me to spring training a bunch of times. Yeah. You've been to the World Series with me. You've been to the All-Star game with me. And I must say, in my defense, I was the ultimate master at getting home as quickly as possible, staying for as long as I could, and then leaving. Plus, I was at the house all the time. I didn't go into the office every day. The house was my office. So when I was home, I was really home. I was making you guys lunches every day, picking you up from school. So that's my excuse.
Two of my favorite memories of my dad when I was growing up was Dad always would pick us up at the bus stop when he was in town, which was a lot of the time. But every once in a while, he would pick us up while riding the ride-on mower. Right. Go up the street, pick us up on the ride-on mower, and drive back. Now, my dad was the king of the field trip.
Oh, yeah.
He was chaperone on almost every field trip, famously milked a cow on one of my sister's field trips. But
Ferguson Farm, right.
One of my favorite was when we were on one of those big coach buses, and I can't even remember where we were going, but the point was...
Hershey Park, yeah.
Thank you. We played, on the TVs, the bus driver played October Sky. And there's my poor old dad in the third row crying, and all the kids on the bus in the back with me are saying, Jeff, is that your dad crying watching this movie?
Look, I can't help it. So I famously asked you and Kelly. You were like 5. Kelly was like 7. After we watched that movie together, I said, so Jeff, what was that movie about? And you said, well, it was about a rocket. That's what the movie was about. So I looked at Kelly and I said, Kelly, what was that movie about? 7-year-old Kelly Kurkjian said, Dad, that was a movie about a father and a son. And that's exactly what that movie was about, which is why poor Pop was crying in the bus with a bunch of third graders around me.
All right, let's go.
And speaking of Pop, I have to say something about my dad. My dad, Pop, was the greatest father ever, greatest husband ever, greatest grandfather ever, and he gave a great feel of baseball to, Andy, Matt, and Tim Kurkjian. He not only taught us how to play, but he taught us how to understand what the game was all about. And as you know, Pop was a really funny little guy, too, and he was a really good player in his day. And I can't tell you how many times, Jeff, we would be in the rec room watching a game after our games are over, and he would throw a pillow down in the middle of the rec room and show us how to make the double play. Like, here's where you put your feet, got to keep. So, and he always would say, when you throw, you got to throw from down here, sidearm, in order to get that runner to slide. And he would always throw the ball into the couch there. Well, one time he threw it a little bit too high, and it missed the couch and went through the French door windows and broke the French door windows, which was not a good thing. So he looks at me, his youngest son, and says, "Tim, tell Mom that you did it, and I'll get you off easy." That was my dad in a nutshell. But the beauty, Jeff, of baseball and fathers and sons is they're everywhere. The game is littered with fathers and sons who played in the big leagues. The Boone family is arguably the greatest family of baseball players in Major League history because they had a grandfather, Ray, a father, Bob, and two boys, Aaron and Brett, who all made the All-Star team. So the only family in the history of baseball that had 3 generations of All-Stars are the Boones. And they got a picture taken, Ray, Bob, Brett, and Aaron, on the field at Comiskey Park in Chicago, and I've seen it many times. It's really great. And Aaron told me that years ago, maybe 10 years ago, he said, "I saw my father cry twice in my entire life. One was when I got the manager's job with the Yankees, and the other was when Bob Boone was the manager of the Reds, and he called his son in to tell him, because Aaron was on the Reds, to tell him that he had made the All-Star team." Those are the stories that you have to love. And, of course, there's the Hairston family, another 3-generation family. Sam Hairston, Jerry Hairston Sr., Jerry Hairston Jr., and Scott Hairston all played in the major leagues. We love that. And, again, there's some great statistical anomalies. I've already told you this more than once. Prince Fielder and Cecil Fielder, father and son, finished their careers with exactly 319 home runs, which I just find amazing.
Sarah Lang's right there.
Right. Craig Biggio and Kevin Biggio and Gary Ward and Darrell Ward are the only father-son combos to hit for the cycle, which we love. The Ripkens, of course, I covered the Ripkens in Baltimore. So in 1987, Cal Sr. was the manager. Billy Ripken was the second baseman. Cal Ripken was the shortstop. And I remember Edward Bennett Williams, the owner of the team, came to spring training and saw these Ripkens like running all over the place. And he looked at me and he goes, he says, "We need to send more Ripkens." He goes, "We got 3 of them out there. We need 3, 4, 5. Can we send 3 more Ripkens?" And the Ripken family was just so close-knit. And this is so classic. Cal Sr., for Christmas one year, bought his sons metal protective cups to wear during games. That's the Christmas present that he got for his 2 boys, which is, if that's not a perfect baseball question answer, I don't know what is. Of course, the Griffeys had the greatest father-son day of anyone in history. Ken Griffey Jr. and Ken Griffey Sr. played on the same team. And in a game against the Angels in 1990, they hit back-to-back home runs. Ken Griffey Jr.
That's unbelievable.
And Ken Griffey Sr. How can that possibly happen? Of course, the Bonzes, Barry and Bobby, are the greatest combo platter father-son in Major League history. When you add up their homers and their stolen bases, it's just inconceivable how productive they were. But, one of my favorite families, of course, is the Bell family. Gus Bell played in the Major Leagues. Buddy Bell, who I covered with the Rangers, played in the major leagues, of course, was a great third baseman. And David Bell and Mike Bell also played in the major leagues, another 3-generation family. So in 82, the first year I really met and got to know Buddy Bell, I got to talking to him about his dad. And he said Gus would come to games once in a while because he's a major league player. He can't get to all these games when Buddy is growing up. But he made it to a high school game once, and he drove his car and parked it beyond the center field fence because he didn't want to sit around all the fans who didn't know what they were talking about. He wanted to watch the game in peace. And Buddy told me if I made a good play, my dad honked the horn once. If I made a great play, he honked the horn twice. How great is that? A father-son combo like that. All right, before we get to the Raveches, Sam and Karl Ravech of ESPN, we have to finish this with I have a team every week.
Yes,
we
you
call
do.
it Team Tim. So this week, we're going to look at the best father-son combos at each position.
Okay.
And there's a great competition here, but Yogi Berra is the catcher. He had two sons who played in the major leagues, and we have Hall of Famer Pudge Rodriguez, whose son played in the major leagues. First baseman is George Sisler, who had two sons who played in the major leagues. He's a Hall of Famer. Craig Biggio is our second baseman. Kevin Biggio is his son. Buddy Bell, who we mentioned, is the third baseman with two sons who played. The shortstop, we don't have a Hall of Famer, but we have Bo Bichette, who's really good, son of Dante Bichette, and Fernando Tatis Jr., who used to be a shortstop, now an outfielder, is the son of Fernando Tatis Sr. The outfield, and how good are these guys? Ken Griffey Jr. and his dad,
Amazing.
Hall of Famers. Barry Bonds and his dad, not Hall of Famers, but we kind of understand why. And then we also have Tony Gwynn, Vladimir Guerrero Sr., Hall of Famer, Tim Raines, Hall of Famer, all have sons who played in the major leagues. In fact, Tim Raines played with his son also. They didn't hit a home run in the same game. And, of course, our utility player is Pete Rose, whose son, Pete Rose Jr., played in the major leagues briefly. And Ed Walsh, one of the great pitchers from the early 1900s, I didn't know this, but he had a son who played in the major leagues. And our managers, so we can get the Boones in on this team somewhere, are Aaron and Bob Boone, who are father-son, who also managed in the major leagues.
So fitting to have a father-son broadcasting duo talking to a father-son broadcasting duo on Is This a Great Game or What? Karl and Sam Ravech join us next on the show. Is This a Great Game or What? Our Father's Day edition. And as a father-son broadcasting duo, we thought it to be only fitting to bring in another father-son broadcasting duo. Karl and Sam Ravech are on the show. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
thanks for having us, Kurkjians.
We've waited a long time for this, to be in the same category as other father-son antics, including the Kurkjians. But there's a lot of them out there, and it's great to be on this podcast with you guys.
Right. Well, Sam, we'll start with you. We know how much your dad taught you when you were a kid about life and broadcasting and everything else. Give us something that he didn't teach you that you probably should have known because he wasn't telling you the right thing.
My dad always taught me to work hard, be on time. One thing he did not really teach me was to cook a whole lot, although I learned that from my mom. He taught me how to grill. I will give him credit for this. My dad was always doing the laundry, so I am always the laundry guy around the house. That is something that I do that he taught me. And cleaning. I mean, he was always a clean guy. So, like, all of these good things, he taught me all the good things. The bad things, I think I learned from all of my friends. But a lot of the good things around the house, he taught me.
Yeah, see, this is why, Tim, you and I get along so well. Like, you and I had a lot of similar traits and qualities, with the exception of that getting to the airport, 12 hours early. But we like clean things. We're big into instant gratification of vacuuming and lawn cutting, so you can see results immediately. Grilling for sure, all the things. That's why you and I have become so close. We're the same.
But here's the thing, though. It has now verged on the precipice of like OCD for me, because I've taken it a little bit too far, where like everything has to be clean. And my wife is like, "Can you just leave it for a second?" Like, I'm that guy that I'm flying back from Tallahassee to Connecticut today. I'm going to unpack my backpack and my bag right away when I get home. Like, I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Jeff, jump in here in a second. Here's how bad I am. When I go on a trip, even if it's for 2 days, I take everything out of my suitcase or bag. I put it in the drawers, and I put the suitcase in a place where I don't have to see it, so I don't feel like I'm on a road trip. Jeff, does this make sense to you?
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit for how crazy you are, because my dad usually is in person for the podcast in the basement I'm recording from with the two of you right now. He'll be here for 20 hours. He'll get here on a Sunday night and he'll leave a Monday night, and he'll still unpack his bags after arriving after baseball tonight, driving from Connecticut to PA, puts his stuff in, takes it out, and packs it up the next day. And Sam, I'm with you. We have been cursed with amazing fathers,
Yes.
but also men that have created this sense of needing to be neat, clean, and tidy. I'm the same way. It drives me nuts. I can't fall asleep if there's dishes in the sink. It drives me insane. That's something.
100% with you, Jeff. But the thing is like you were just mentioning the airport. So we're all clean, we're tidy, we got the laundry done, but like we will be not late, but we are just on time. Like we are not showing up early to things. I know I have heard a numerous amount of stories from producers at ESPN to anybody working on shows that Dad has done. And they all say he comes prepared, he's ready to roll, but he's showing up like right when we got to go. He is ready to go right when he needs to be there.
Ravi, explain how you never worry about those things. I worry about everything. How do you do that?
I think never worrying is overstated. I think what you don't see is the early worry. Like, all right, you have to be in a mind frame of how many hours, how many minutes is it going to take to walk from point A to point B, or to drive from point A to point B. But that involves checking Waze early. Like, it's not as if I get in the car and hope things work out. There's a lot of forethought that goes into it. I will say I do, and I'm sure like you three, have that dream every now and then of not being able to get to the studio. Literally, in the building I've been in for 30 years, every door is locked. I cannot get to the show. That is a dream/nightmare that I have had, where I'm walking the halls and every door I'm supposed to go through is closed, and yet I can see through some window the show is like starting. Like, that happened. And I will say this, when we did the games from Connecticut and Miami during the pandemic in Korea, I learned that whether I'm there or not, the show is going to start. I mean, the first KBO game we ever did was supposed to start at this silly hour of 5:25 a.m. We all know broadcasts start on the hour, and at the worst, on the half hour, not 25 minutes after. And we found out 15 minutes before this KBO game, of course, in which we know zero players. We know next to us. And they said, your game's rained out. We're now going to go do the SK Wyverns and the KT Wiz. And literally that's telling us you're now going to have a blind exam. I went into the other room in my house to print out rosters, because otherwise, there he goes. Or as Harold Reynolds famously said on a set of Baseball Tonight, my man. You can't call everybody my man. So I go to print off rosters, and it's 5:24, 5:25, and I'm slowly walking back onto my little studio, and I hear Eduardo Perez say, "Welcome to the KBO." Well, there you have it. The show went on. I said, sorry, I was printing out rosters, and maybe you guys are good at speaking to this. Having done something for 30 years, and Tim a little bit longer, you do develop a bit of a leash where they allow something like that. I don't panic about that. It doesn't happen very often, but it did happen that morning, and I'm still employed.
Right, and that is Ravi's greatest strength, is he never panics. Sam, we did a Baseball Tonight my first year there, 1998, and the show wasn't even supposed to happen, and then Judd Birch walked in and said, okay, we're doing 45 minutes right now. No rundown, no shot sheets, nothing. We get it. He gets in our ear, the producer, and says, boys, good luck. You're going to need it. And your father never panicked. He steered the ship. Harold and I just followed him. Perfect point guard. That is the key for all young broadcasters. Never panic. Sam, Jeff, you agree?
When I started doing morning radio, this is as true as can be. I'm the morning show host, right? I'm the one bringing people in. I talk out of the songs. I do all that stuff. And my dad always talked about the stress of being a great point guard as a host, and always use, Sam, your dad as the example as the best point guard in the game of television, because he knows how to cue people up, not in the obvious way, right, Tim? Didn't you have a story like that? But doing it when you've been doing it as long as these gentlemen have together, of course it gets easier because you just know where he's going to go with this. If you bring up a ground rule double, poor Tim Kurkjian over there is going to blow a gasket that he's going to have to say, it's an automatic double. And Karl knows that. But the point is, being a point guard, Karl, is something that my dad uses you as example, has taught me how to be a better teammate and be a good point guard to use the people around us. And Sam, I'm sure you learned that from your dad as well.
That was one of the things that he told me going into this thing was, he has always said, I want to be remembered as a broadcaster, not really always for what I did, but for the fact that I've made the people on the show better. Like, being that point guard and facilitating, that's always a skill of his. And that's something that I hear, again, from people at ESPN who worked on Baseball Tonight or worked in the baseball space. They always said the most difficult show at ESPN was the Baseball Tonight when they were doing 2-a-days, because you just didn't always know what was happening. And when you have somebody that panics in those moments, not always the best teammate, right? So you got to have somebody that can be a little bit calm and be a little bit poised. I'll tell you this story really quick. I remember that I was probably in middle school, and my dad was playing in a charity golf tournament in Hartford. I think it was the PGA kind of event that they have here in Hartford. And I was going to caddy. And again, just speaking to the showing up right on time, I know my dad remembers this. We pulled up in the circle, and he was playing in it. I was caddying. His tee time was about like at noon. We showed up at 11:59. And I grabbed the bag out of the trunk. We're racing to the tee box. He goes up there, gives a wave to everybody on the first tee, and he pipes a nice draw down the first fairway, about 300 yards, and he's set up perfectly. And I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I do remember that. And I will say, again, that circumstance was beyond our control, because that Travelers Championship was the day after the College World Series had ended. I had flown in. So, again, the airlines, which unfortunately screw things up more than they have success, they screwed that up. I was delayed. So it was literally a wire shot. And thankfully, we made it. That had nothing to do with this concept that you guys have been talking about kind of getting there a few minutes in advance. But I do that intentionally. There was no intent on that one. There was
no. But the point being was it was cool though. Like
that part's great. But what I know about Jeffrey and Sam, Tim, that they have listened to, thankfully, is in our field. And even as a parent, and I think it's important, as a dad, it's hard to be a one-trick pony. You don't want to be a one-trick pony. And I think that is true about your career. And, I know Jeffrey is incredibly versatile. He's done some of the play-by-play stuff. We've seen him in Williamsport, which was amazing. Sam went about this differently than I did. I started in a small market and was a news and sports anchor in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in Binghamton, New York, and then went to ESPN and did those overnight sports centers. And over 30 years transitioned into play-by-play. Sam began his whole thing doing play-by-play AA baseball in Richmond, Virginia, and then continued the play-by-play stuff at ESPN. And I continuously implored him, try to get into the studio, do those things, be as versatile as you can. Part of being the great point guard comes from the experience of being a host, a co-host on a show in which two people are doing SportsCenter. You're interviewing different people throughout the show. That's why I think the transition to play-by-play is a lot easier. And maybe, Sam and Jeff, when you went from studio person or play-by-play person into studio, you had that tool in your toolbox already, and it makes you better at what you're doing now.
Sam and Carl, I have to ask because what you two do is, as Carl mentioned, right? Sam, you're doing play-by-play. Carl, you're doing play-by-play and show hosting. What is that dynamic like? Because my dad's not calling me and saying, hey, you got it wrong. Luke Combs is the second best country artist in 2024, right? So even though we do tell stories and I interview people for a living and doing this podcast, I've learned so much from my dad about how to have a good interview when we prep together. I've learned so much. And if I get anything from this podcast besides the great time I've been able to spend with my dad, it's going to be seeing how he prepares for things. But Sam, are you asking your dad for air checks? Like, hey, can you listen to this? Or Carl, are you listening in and sending notes? Or is it more of a, hey, don't ask, don't tell, let's work. Let's keep working hard and getting better?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I will send him some of my shows and ask him for feedback, but he's always been like I'm not going to intrude on your space. Like, he wanted me to learn, on my own. It doesn't really do me a service, I don't think, by just trying to dictate some of what we do and how we do it. I've always asked for advice and help whenever I thought like I could use it. And he's always been very gracious with, his time and watching it and giving me advice as well. But, along with the advice of actually like the job portion of it, sometimes I just need the fatherly advice on it, which is like, you're doing great, man. Like, just take it easy, enjoy the ride. You're going to be fine. This is supposed to be fun. Like, that is some of the best advice I think I could get. The other stuff, like, we'll learn like anybody on any job, right? You learn as you go. But sometimes you just need that comforting hand behind you to say, like, you're doing all right. It's okay.
Right. And preparation, as we've talked about, is so important because I live in fear of being unprepared for a question being asked or something that I don't know. And I think I can tell this story, Ravi. Our dear friend Kyle Peterson, who's, the best college baseball analyst, one of our best friends, absolutely tremendous. He tells the story that he was a dugout reporter early on, and some obscure guy had just come out of the game, and they asked Kyle to interview the guy, but he starts the interview and he doesn't know who the guy is, and he has to ask him, like, who are you? I mean, those are the things that I absolutely live in fear of. You guys must have similar circumstances where you go, boy, I better know what I'm doing here. Otherwise, I could make a complete fool of myself.
I'll say this, Tim, really quick. We had a game, like I said, did a regional final last night. There was a point in which after the game, I started hearing the producer count down in my ear to a post-game interview. I had no idea who we were interviewing at the time. I hear 10. We got an interview headset coming on, 10, 9, and I'm hitting the talkback button saying, who do we got? Who do we got? And we finally figured it out. It was a great interview. But yes, to your point, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, Tim.
Absolutely. And Ravi, how many times did you and I stand underneath the stands at Yankee Stadium or Fenway Park? We can't even see the final play of the game because we're trapped in a runway somewhere. Then we have to run out on the field and interview people. Again, that's why you got to be quick on your feet in this business. Otherwise, you're not going to make it.
Look, thinking on your feet or seat, depending on whether you're standing or sitting, is important. The idea of not knowing a person you're interviewing or something like that, having done Baseball Tonight for 20-odd years, there was, and SportsCenter too, you learn little secrets and tricks of the trade. I mean, to suggest that of the 15 games a night, when all of a sudden they come in with a Mariner highlight and some backup catcher is in there, you learn, if you kind of lay out here the play-by-play voice in the background that's actually on the original highlight, is likely going to mention the guy's name, so you hear the name, and then you sound a lot more informed. I'm sorry, I did not know every single Major League player during the years we were doing Baseball Tonight. Similarly, hockey highlights with a lot of the foreign players. I know SportsCenter anchors have learned to just let the highlight kind of play a little bit without saying something when you don't know if it's for Stenke or for Yagi that's making the play. The play-by-play guy, you'll hear it on that highlight, and then you can kind of pick up on it. So there's little tricks of the trade, that you can learn. Just two quick stories about the teaching part of it, my philosophy, and look, we have dads too, or had dads too. The field I got into was an absolute foreign language to my mom and dad. This whole thing was something they could never offer advice on because they didn't even understand it. And after not getting a job in Binghamton when I was the weekend sports anchor and not getting the weekday job, when a good friend of Tim and I's, Bill Pito, he left as the weekday guy. I was supposed to take his job and didn't get it. So I thought that's the end of this career. And my dad said, probably want to come home now. We'll start, let's start over. Let's get a real job. I'm supporting you. Come on back. So there wasn't a lot of advice that way, but there was plenty of advice on the other things to what Sam is talking about. Being a good teammate, saying yes to generally any assignment you're being asked to do. The easier you make your boss's life, the more opportunities you're likely to have. Because in our field, there are many who are a pain in the ass to the boss. They make it harder on them. And just be the guy or the woman that gets along with everybody. Learn the tricks of the trade so you can appreciate, what an audio person is doing, what a cameraman is going through, how a producer is thinking, as opposed to you probably should have said this here, layout here, peaks and valleys with the voice. Those things I learned by observing the people in the field, not necessarily by asking a parent or a father who never was in it. You guys have parents that are in it. I just don't ever look at it like that's my my primary responsibility. You'll figure it out, and you're you. I mean, most importantly, don't be me. Be you. We've been around. Think about the legends of broadcasting who are our peers that have gone on to such great things, and Chris Berman and Mike Tirico and Chris Fowler and Reese Davis and John Saunders and Robin Roberts. There are just little bits and pieces that you observe that they didn't come and tell me, and you pick up things, but you've got to be yourself. And I always felt too much interference means you're going to be more like me, or don't be Stuart Scott. There's only one that ever lived. Don't try that. And there was a generation of people who did try the mimicking thing, and I that's just not me.
Now, Karl, I have a question a little bit about, day of when you're doing a big game, a Sunday night baseball or Monday night baseball game. And when my dad was in the booth with you guys, it always seemed like there was a running bit or a gag or something that you were able to get the audience in on. And I recall one of my favorites, and I hope I don't steal your favorite story, which is when you guys were at Fenway Park and my dad was wearing a winter coat in the booth, mind you, and gloves. But
Yes.
he had lost one of his gloves, and he was complaining, I can't find my glove. And at every bump shot, when you come back from a commercial or you're about to go to a commercial, you had the whole camera crew in on it, putting his glove on the monster, it's on a scene, and Dad never noticed until you played the playback. I mean, just genius. I had to, because I know you had to have been behind that prank, right?
I was certainly a part of it. I mean, we were always trying to conspire ways, and unfortunately, your dad, who I know is in the room and can hear this, he is one of the perfect targets for things like because of the way he behaves. And look, there's the great story about getting to a Yankee game when it's snowing 7 hours early, sitting in a parking garage that it wasn't even open. Somehow he got the car in there. The game gets canceled. He's got to go home. But he created so many of those opportunities. We started this before we came on to do the podcast. The heavy sigh, the knee slap. There are so many mannerisms that everybody, I mean, Jeff and Sam, you walk into a Baseball Tonight green room, and as soon as he walks in, and then everybody's doing the Tim Kurkjian act. So, yeah, the glove thing was so great because Eduardo was in on it. Everybody was in on it. And there was this glove, it's like the TV over Sam's, left shoulder there. Everybody can see it, except where the hell the glove is. There goes the glove. There it is. It's in the popcorn. It's everywhere. It's right on that kid. It was wonderful.
Right. The message here, though, the chemistry between the people on air is the most important thing, whether you're in a booth or in the studio. Ravi and I have great chemistry, and I easily irritate him and easily annoy him by bringing back the same old lines and the same old jokes because he's already heard them before, and he rolls his eyes better than anyone I've ever seen, whether it's, some stupid joke that I tell. He even knows it's coming. Now on every show we do, I look at Ravi and go, did I ever tell you I went to Walter Johnson High School? And he just wants to leave the booth. But the irritable Ravi is an even better Ravi. So I'm a big believer chemistry in the booth is absolutely critical. You young guys recognize that, right?
Yeah, we do. Tim, I'm curious, when was the first moment that you realized, I think I can have some chemistry with this guy?
No, it was right away with Ravi because, again, I saw very early on as the show host, just like we talked about earlier, his job was to make me feel comfortable there because he knew if I was uncomfortable, I wasn't going to be any good. And if he panicked and he was uncomfortable, I would have no chance. So the chemistry began very quickly between the two. As far as throwing barbs at each other, that took a few years, and now it's like an all-out war every time we go on the air, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's hilarious until these people, and again, you guys have dealt with social media your entire life. What always I find so amazing is while we would do a broadcast and Tim is about to start a story and I'll just finish it before he goes into, did I ever tell you? Yes, I know. Yes, I know you wrote for that. I understand all of those. I get it. People would unfortunately sit there and say, please leave Tim alone. Like, why making fun of Tim? And at that point, I just said, that you're in a sense, you're not getting it. And like you said, Jeff, the goal is to invite people in. Like we're trying to make you part of this. If you were, and I think we got to a point, or I certainly got to a point where it felt like you had a certain real core group of people that were watching who understood. Like, it's like watching Seinfeld. Whatever, you get it. Like, I get it. And the first time somebody watches that show, they may look at it and be like, I don't understand any of it. But the other people in the room who've watched it for so long, they understand it. And the other point about the comfort and the chemistry and the point guard, anybody that ever does play-by-play should realize personally that I believe we are only as good as the analysts because those are the ones with the expertise. I don't really think, with the exception of a very few people, that people tune in to hear who's doing the play-by-play. Game 5, Game 6, Game 7, we're all going to watch because it's Game 5, 6, or 7, not because play-by-play person X, Y, and Z are doing it. I always look at the play-by-play and booth as the condiment to the main course. If it's a burger, where the ketchup and the salt and the mustard and the pickle, that's what we are. We can make it taste a little bit better, but you're still going to eat. You still want to watch that. And the only way that you entice people to watch it is to make sure that the Tims and the Eduardos and the Cones and the Bucks and the Harolds are comfortable. I mean, Buck Showalter is like one of the most wonderful human beings ever. But it was very evident to us when he first started, he wasn't comfortable on TV. And if you could figure out a way to get Buck to be loose and to share what he does in the room with us on TV, we all win and the viewer wins. And that to me is the key. If you can get those guys to be as comfortable as possible and as good as possible, and to your point, Jeff, that doesn't mean saying, Tim, do you remember when Barry Bonds came? Like, of course Tim remembers that. You've got to take them down a road that they're not exactly sure. And I know the analysts on our show have said, you never know what the hell he's going to ask you. And I think that's important. You got to keep the analysts on edge. I don't want you to sit there and think like this is going to be rote and routine and easy and you know it. I'm never going to embarrass anybody ever. But I know, I listen to what they say in the green room and other things. Later on, that's going to come up in the show. Like, that's coming up. And it may have nothing, more often than not, nothing to do with baseball. But Bobby Valentine talks about a bike accident that he had, or left a wallet, or Tim said something, we will bring that up. That becomes the inside joke that everybody at home is going to be privy to. That happens.
Right. Long story, I'll make it quick. I got a speeding ticket while doing a radio show on my way to Bristol once with my daughter and her best friend in the back seat. Ravi, the mischievous Ravi, found the audio of me talking to a policewoman while I was doing a radio show and ran it, ambushed me on the show that night. It was one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. It was totally hilarious, but it's because he recognized that's funny. And that's part of the battle when you're a play-by-play guy or any on-air guy. What is going to work?
Right. And quickly, Jeff, the wedding dancing video that we've seen a million times, the most important lesson in all of this is, A, be comfortable with who you are and don't be afraid to laugh at yourself. My God, Tim has made a career not only out of laughing at himself, but because of it, causing everyone else to have a good time and laugh too.
You kind of gain that mischievous and in all in good heart, Ravi, in all in good heart. But do you have that kind of, it's very creative to come up with these kind of things. Let me find this radio clip or let me get this dancing clip because Tim said he was going to a wedding. Do you find that you have that creative streak?
I find that I want to have it, but I don't feel like I'm at the point yet where I think I deserve to be having that amount of leeway. Like, I feel like I need to be a little bit more straight-laced right now. Maybe once we establish ourselves a little bit more, we could get a little bit more creative. But the one thing that I do agree with that my dad said was, like, you have to be able to laugh at yourself when you mess up or when you make a mistake or just in general. Like this, again, I go back to just saying this is supposed to be fun. If we're not having fun on the air, I guarantee you the people at home aren't having fun either. So, that is another piece of advice that I have just carried along with me. And I think the mantra on Baseball Tonight for a long time, when I would always go in, was just get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like that was something they would always say. And I took that with me too.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we could keep you guys all day, but Sam has to go to the airport. One question, Sam, do you have a printed boarding pass in your pocket at the moment? Because I have never left a hotel room or home without a printed boarding pass in my pocket. Or are you like your dad who doesn't care? He just shows up and walks through.
I have not checked into my flight yet. How about that?
I am so proud of you. That is just...
You leave in 90 minutes, Sam.
I'll try not to get a speeding ticket on the way to the airport.
Right.
Especially while you're doing a radio show.
That's right.
All right. Well,
Sam and Carl, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Seriously. And Sam, I know you'll join me in saying a happy Father's Day to these two amazing broadcast dads. Thank you for being our best friends, our biggest supporters. We would not have what we have in our lives without you. We both sound a lot like our dad. Sam, you're a lot luckier than I am in that case because your dad's got a velvet smooth voice, and I've got this mid-puberty voice that I'm dealing with. But thank you, Sam and Carl. Happy Father's Day, Carl and Dad. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Good luck with the podcast. It's great.
Right. Thanks, everyone. You guys are great.
Hey, you guys think.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Carl, for joining us for our Father's Day episode. And Dad, you mentioned it at the beginning of the show. It's very special. I'm a first-time dad. This is my very first Father's Day. We got a 10-month-old baby girl. She is just the light of my life. She's incredible. My wife just had her first Mother's Day, naturally. And, I mean, I pulled out all the stops. I got her these rings that have the name of our new puppy, Ranger, and then McKinley with her birthstone and, like, you know, little stackable rings. And got her, like, this really cute bag that she can carry McKinley in and everything. And she just recently asked me, well, what do you want for your first Father's Day? And without hesitation, I said, a new vacuum for the pool. And she said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Make my life a lot easier. And I remember I used to make fun of you for asking for very practical gifts growing up. thinking, Dad, don't you want something cool, some fancy machine? You go, no, I just need some new socks and maybe a new shovel. That'd be nice.
Right. Jeff,
That's a dad gift, and I'm okay with it.
Well, you remember one Father's Day recently. For Father's Day, I got a broom to help clean the house. You got me an ear trimmer so I could trim my ears.
Right.
And you got me a trimmer so I could shave my back. Now, that's a Father's Day that you don't forget. Something to clean the floors, to shave your ears, and to shave your back.
That's an Armenian Father's Day.
Oh,
right?
my God.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. And to all the dads out there, a happy Father's Day to you. Thank you for making us a part of your Father's Day week. And as always, thank you for being a part of our family.